Sarah from the team at Scotty's, and I'm here today with Nikki, who's the founder of Scotty's, and Stuart, who's the CEO. And we asked you to put your questions to them. So I've got a list here of questions that we've been sent in, and I'm going to put them to you both now. So the first one we've got here is via Instagram, and I've got a question from account Mind and I, and they have asked, do you get emotional learning about every child's different scenarios?
Oh, you're staring at me, so I'm
yeah. Do you get emotional, Nikki?
Yeah, I think it. You know, anyone that works with bereaved children, I don't think you can say that you don't get emotional. There's definitely you obviously learn coping skills when you're actually speaking to the families, you know, and you don't let on all your emotion. But I think at Scotty's, for me, especially when you're a mum, it does pull at the heartstrings, and every single member that we support has a different story. Like, no two families have experienced exactly the same death, so you're always hearing a new story. And for me personally, when we get a new family come through to Scotty's and I see the membership form or I take the phone call, you then start to think, you know, I remember, oh God, they're at the start of this journey. So it does bring back memories, and it is emotional. Yeah, it's really hard. You're working with bereaved children, so it's going to hurt. But I would say one thing about the team is it's absolutely amazing that the team have got this connection. So if you feel a bit emotional or you've been affected by something you've heard, there's always someone to chat to. And, you know, we've got supervision where the team will talk about their cases and stuff. So, but yes, ultimately, I think, yeah, I do get emotional sometimes. Try not to, but it does affect you sometimes, yeah.
Those are the things you learn as well, aren't they? Like the supervision is things that when we started the charity, you're not even thinking about that kind of thing, and then you bring professional people on board that, you know, that's their bread and butter, and then they start to put some of these things in place, and you realise how important things like supervision is, because you can be having some really emotional conversations with families, and you're taking that on. You're there to support and listen, but you're taking that on yourself. So to be able to offload sometimes to someone is quite important. It's also a massive motivator, isn't it?
Yeah,
when you hear
huge.
these stories,
yeah.
It just makes you just every day just like, right, we need to get on and make this happen.
Yeah, in a horrible way, there's always a positive from a negative story, if that makes sense. You know, you're always,
Yeah, of course, that's why we're here.
Yeah, exactly. You want to help, you want to do more, so.
And I've got another question here. Have you found that we have fewer beneficiaries now that obviously we're no longer in Afghanistan?
Oh, no. That's a really interesting one. That's one that I think about a lot, because I think people naturally assume that because it's not on the news, you're not hearing about the guys and girls serving, you know, and out in Afghan or Iraq, or I think people just naturally think, oh, it's okay at the minute. But there's deaths happening all the time. You know, there's illnesses, accidents. There's training course accidents, you know, where they're off training. There's missions that are going on that no one knows about. So no, we'll receive, you know, we're getting new members, new families contact us all the time. It's never dipped down since we've started, to be honest. And also, the more the word gets out there about Scotty's, the more families are hearing about us that, you know, they might have experienced the death of a parent quite a few years ago, and they're only now just seeking that support.
And that's important for families to know that they can still get in touch, even if the death was years ago.
Yeah,
they can still
definitely
get in touch with us, and we'll still offer that support.
Yeah, I mean, bereavement doesn't just go away, does it? So, and you know, we've learned that it affects a child and young person throughout their whole life. That's why we support up to the age of 25. So, even if they contact us, 10 years after the death, there will be those times when they really need that extra support. So,
we know that. We've set ourselves a long-term goal of supporting at least 1,000 children and young people annually by 2030. So this year, I think to date we've supported about 494. I think it is this year. So we already know that even if there are no more fatalities in the military, no more deaths, there are hundreds of children and young people out there who we aren't supporting at the moment. So even there's a massive job for us to do even there, isn't there? So just getting the message out that we can help those guys, and then also sadly more of the members that we've seen come to us in the past 12 months have come because death because of suicide. So that is obviously another dynamic within the military community that has become more obvious in the last year or so. So even if the killed in action deaths are not as high, we've seen a lot more suicides in the last year or so.
And it's interesting you said that, because we had actually been asked, do we support all children who've experienced the death of a parent who served in the British forces? And I think sometimes there are still people that think that we support children who've experienced the death of a parent who served. So I think it's really important that people know that that's not the case.
Well, so we support children and young people up to the age of 25 who have experienced the death of a parent who served for the British Armed Forces. So whether that's RAF, Army, Navy, Royal Marines, regardless of the marital status or if they've got support from another charity, none of that, all that's irrelevant, doesn't matter. If a child has experienced the death of a parent who served for our country, then we want to be able to help. Where we tend to look, work more with the family and talk to the family more is when it's a parent who was a veteran at the time of their death. So at Scotty's, we're very, all the work we do is around the needs of a bereaved military child. So we're bringing the military element into everything we do at Scotty's. So potentially, if you've got a child that has never experienced the military lifestyle, hasn't got a really strong military connection because their parent wasn't serving at the time, and they weren't born when their dad was or their mum was serving, and they haven't really got that connection, it can potentially be, it can potentially have a negative impact on the child's well-being and be very confusing. So in those instances, we'd work with the family and we'd signpost them to make sure we can find an organisation that best meets their needs. But at the end of the day, if a child has experienced the death of a parent who served and that child has been, affected by the loss of the military connection, then we want to be able to help those children. All the criteria is on our website, if I've not explained that very well.
No, that makes absolute sense. Thank you. And we had a question in through Instagram from Katie Park, and she asked, where does your motivation come from to keep growing and supporting?
Oh, the families, I think. Definitely. The feedback from the families is so important to everyone, not just the families team that work directly with the children and young people, but the whole team, I would say that is the ultimate. There's nothing better to spur you on than receiving a message from the children or the parent to say.
And what kind of feedback do you get?
Oh, it varies. It could be something like they've been on their very first Scotty break and the parent only died, a few months ago, and just having that break away meant the world to them, and they wouldn't have been able to do that without Scotty's. And it allowed them time to bond as a family and talk about their parent that had died. Then you have other ones where, the families team have been doing direct one-to-one support work with a bereaved child, and you hear the stories that they're sharing with the team of how much this is having a positive impact on that young person. That's an incredible feeling. But again, like we said before, also the emotional stories spur you on to be like, we need to do more. This can't be happening. We need to be there to offer more support. So don't know whether yours is different, but that's mine.
No, I think, well, that's the main one, isn't it? That's the big motivator. You hear that, and obviously you've got a personal element that keeps driving you forward as well, which again is another motivator. I think there's a couple of other things which I found as well. Is we've got this core value of love what you do. That's definitely, you see that with the team when you come in, and not just being a part of the charity, but loving the part of it that you're involved in, your job every day. So when you come in and you really love what you do every day, you almost don't need that much motivation, because you just kind of, you just crack on. You want to be there, that's a big difference, isn't it? And then I would also say, I think a lot of the team have got a great deal of self-discipline, which I think also helps, because motivation can go up and down. Like, you can be really hyped up by hearing an emotional story, and we're like, yes, we've got to try and achieve the mission and help these guys more. And then you go home and there's external influences and other things that happen, and that can dip your mood, and then you come in the next day and you don't feel quite as positive. But this team's got a lot of self-discipline in that they'll shake that off, and actually just, even when they don't feel like it, they just get the job done. So, slightly more technical answer, but Nikki's is the better. It's the better.
No, that's great, thank you. We've spoken a lot here about growth and finding the balance between the charity getting bigger in line with the demand for support. So where do you see the charity in 5 years' time? I'll
let you go
to
first.
Stuart.
Me? Well,
Yeah.
I'll do the operational side of things.
Okay.
And then, so, well, I mentioned earlier that we've got this long-term goal to support at least 1,000 children and young people annually by 2030. And so this year, we've supported 494. So we've mapped out what it's going to take us to deliver that long-term goal. So we kind of already know where we need to be financially in 5 years' time, where we need to be in terms of the infrastructure to support the family team. So from an operational point of view, we've got that quite well mapped out. And so we'll be quite a lot different. And if you think about, we know today what it costs us to support roughly 500 children and young people. So if we want to be doing 1,000 children and young people annually, we're going to be at least double the amount of expenditure and all the infrastructure that comes with that as you grow. So from my perspective, I'm pretty clear. We need to be a £2 million plus a year charity by 2030 if we're going to be able to support all those young people to the level of support that we're doing today. So.
Yeah, and I think from the families team side of it, we've done a lot of reviewing, a lot of, putting the frameworks in and their foundations. So we've got a really clear idea of what the needs are of a bereaved military child, and then the plans for the operations teams to raise the money so that we can put those into place. So developing our Strides program more to make sure that we're supporting within schools. So, helping the schools to help support bereaved military children. That's a thing that we'd really love to develop. We also want to develop our Springboard program. So our program for 18 to 25-year-olds, it was new this year. We've already highlighted, where the need is. So it's putting those plans into place. There's still so much more to do. And again, the support program, which is something we've worked really hard on this year. But there is still more to develop in that. There's a real need to make sure that the right support is there to meet the needs of a bereaved forces child. So still lots more work to do.
Lots for us to be getting on with. And one question we often hear in the non-profit world is how much is spent on fundraising versus charitable activities?
Yeah, that's the classic question, isn't it? And that's actually, there's a simple answer and then there's a more complicated answer. Actually, the simple answer, we're actually just doing our 2020 annual financial report. So by the end of this month, so we're recording this, it's the beginning of October, by the end of October, we'll have our annual report out. And so we'll highlight what that looks like as a ratio. And this year, what we decided to do is, because you've got these big financial reports that have all that information in, but they can be quite confusing if you're not financially minded, you don't know your way around those annual reports. So what we're going to do this year is we're going to produce a scaled down version, which we call the supporter annual review. So we're going to pull out all the highlights and try and make it as informative as possible, but in an easier to digest kind of way. And then we're going to take that and we're going to make a podcast about it. And then we're going to take the podcast and we're going to make a video about the recording of the podcast. So we're basically trying to put it out there and to all of our supporters in a really kind of easy way to take on board. So that actual number will come from that at the end of the month. But it is an interesting question because you've got to really balance. I mean, I know we've been doing this for about 11 years now. And I know before Scotty'S was started, we weren't involved in charities at all. So we would always be looking at, well, surely the less that's spent on fundraising, the better. That's what you want, isn't it? You want to see that as much of your pound is going to the charitable activities. And that's right to an extent. But as we've already discussed, we know that we need to more than double in size by 2030 if we're going to support, over 1,000 young people every year. So to do that, we need to invest in growth. And you can't do that unless you invest a little bit into fundraising each year. So each year we've got to make sure that we can put a little bit aside to grow our fundraising a bit more so that we can raise a little bit more the next year to help us towards that goal. So it's just getting that balance right, really. So it is a tough one, and the public quite rightly want to make sure that you're spending it in the right way. But if you do spend a little bit in fundraising, it doesn't mean that that's a bad thing, because actually the following year, hopefully you're showing that you've raised more funds. So
yeah. No, that all makes sense. And actually related to that, I've got a question here from Isaac, who's 10. He's currently taking part in the Press Up Challenge that we've done on Facebook. And he has asked, what are you going to do with the money raised from the Press Up Challenge?
I'll do this one as well then, shall I?
Yeah,
This
but
is
we
the
should
money
give
one.
a shout out
Yeah.
to Isaac.
Thanks to
Well,
Isaac and to everyone else that's taken part in the Press Up Challenge.
Great
That's
job.
amazing.
It's a great job. So good. It's a good question as well, Isaac. So do you know what our ideal is, that we can, that if any member of the public fundraises or donates to Scotty's, that money just goes 100% directly on the family program. So the family programs are Smiles, Support, Strides and Springboard, and all of the work that goes on around that. And then obviously outside of that, you've got the operational costs to run the charity and then the fundraising as well. So our ideal would be that any public fundraising, any donations just get spent on that, and then that we raise money from things like merchandise sales, maybe very specific like corporates and individuals who are happy to fund the core costing because they kind of understand that investment is important for the growth of the charity. That's how we want to do it. We're not there at the moment. There are very few charities that are structured like that. It's a very difficult thing to do. So at the moment we do have our Overwatch program, and 100% of that's the first stage. 100% of that, if you're an Overwatch subscriber, that goes directly to the family program. So no operational costs paid for from that money. So that's where we kind of want to go that way. So, and to answer Isaac's question, at the moment, it's a bit like the previous question, where as little as possible will go on fundraising and operational costs, and as much as possible on the family programs. But at the moment, there will be like a small percentage will go towards helping us raise more money, and then the bulk of it will go towards the family programs.
But I think with that, the key to remember is if you're donating or fundraising, how I like to think of it is every single penny is helping. So even if it's going on fundraising or the operations costs, the core costs to cover the internet bill or whatever it might be, it is still helping the families team to be able to deliver that support. So whatever people can give will help.
It's not that when you pay for running costs that it's going into a black hole and it's wasted. It's like it's keeping the lights on, and everyone works really hard. I mean, we're out here in a warehouse.
And it's a bit cold.
It is a bit cold.
Which is all about trying to keep the costs down, isn't it? And so everyone works really hard to keep those costs as low as possible, but they do exist because they help, the team. You don't want the guys that are delivering direct support to young people to be worrying about whether the lights are going to go off, or to be sat in coats while they're trying to deliver bereavement support to a young person. So
thank you, that's really helpful. And getting back to the work of the charity and what it does for children and young people, what have been the biggest challenges since COVID? Obviously from a support perspective first, please, Nikki.
Oh yeah, okay. So, what an interesting time that's been. I think we saw a real rise in like our cases, I guess is what we call them. So when we're offering direct one-to-one support, when families are contacting us for that one-to-one support, we saw a big lift in that, where families were reaching out to us because, understandably, when a child's already experienced the death of a parent, and then you're hearing about, COVID and people dying and key workers and anxiety levels in everyone, I think, have gone up. But for a child that's already experienced the death of a parent, that was huge and really heartbreaking. Many of them were already experiencing so many challenges, and then this happened. And also, we saw new families join the charity that had experienced the death of a parent who was serving during lockdown. So that meant for those guys, they weren't able to go to the hospital and say goodbye, for example, or there weren't so many people at the funeral. There wasn't that support network rallying around them. So I think the work of the families team has definitely increased. It really highlighted the need to develop our support program a lot more, and it also, the positive is, we realised that actually we can do a lot of the support online. The families are now used to Zoom calls and Teams calls because they're doing quizzes every week. And actually, we can do this. So we were then, since then, we've been able to bring on Mark and Charlie to the team, who are offering direct support over internet video calls, which is incredible.
It's interesting that, isn't it? Because before COVID, it would have felt quite a strange thing to do, to ask a child to do like a video call with someone or open up to them. But now suddenly we're in a time where that feels like a natural thing to do.
It solved the problem for us, really, because we're in this situation where we were referring, when a case got to a certain point, we would refer on somewhere else for them to get the bereavement support. And we were at this point where, well, we can't really justify having support workers all over the country going out and meeting all the families. So how are we ever going to kind of do that? And we were getting to a point where we felt that we needed bespoke military bereavement support, which we could deliver directly, but we did. And then, like Nick says, you know, the situation with using things like Microsoft Teams actually provided a solution. So we will now carry on delivering that support directly to young people, but using the technology that's available to us.
It's giving them the choice, isn't it? So we can say to them, they all the activities we do in Smiles, that engages the families, that, you know, the competitions, the weekly emails, you know, we're constantly engaging with them. So they build up that trust. So then when the tough times come and they contact us for that direct bereavement support, it's then we can give them a choice. We can find someone in your area locally that you can go and see face to face, or you can speak to someone over video call at Scotty's. And so far, that's just been incredible. Like, it's been working amazingly. So really proud that we've been able to offer that. So, yeah.
And Stuart, what about from an operational point of view then? Because obviously COVID had a big impact on businesses, charities.
Yeah.
You know, it's had an impact on everyone. What about on Scotty's as a charity?
It's a similar story, really, isn't it? We've had to innovate, which we like doing here, actually. So it wasn't as hard as maybe it could have been. You know, and the guys here were already using things like Microsoft Teams. You know, everyone's like, oh, what's this new thing? Like, we've been using it for years, you know. And so actually, I think it was a bit nerve-wracking at the beginning because you're seeing all these, particularly fundraising, all these events that are being cancelled and just not happening. So you're worrying about where the funding is going to come from. But actually, the team innovated really quickly, came up with new ideas, took fundraising online. We got a lot of great support from grant funders and corporate funders who have supported us in the past, who, you know, a lot of emergency grant funding available. So actually, the end result was that we didn't suffer, you know, that we didn't have to cut back on any of the support programs, the family programs, that side of things. So, and yeah, we've learned in the same way, really, and there's a lot of things that we will carry on. So we'll carry on doing some of those virtual events, even though now we're getting back to regular mass participation fundraising. We launched Overwatch, which we mentioned earlier, during COVID, which is a great way for people to support the charity long term. So we realised that we needed a few more. We were too reliant on just a few income streams. So as soon as those income streams dry up for whatever reason, you leave yourself a little bit vulnerable if you don't have it. So, you know, looking at things like Overwatch and other opportunities to spread the risk a bit. So if one dips, then you can pick up the slack from other areas. And we're in this position now. We're in a bit of a weird position at the moment because we're not 100% in the office. We're not 100% at home. We've got this kind of hybrid working that everyone's talking about. And again, you know, we spoke earlier about investment in growth and infrastructure. We're now looking at like, okay, how do we have meetings where we've got 2 people at home and 3 people in the office, and how do we use it's the tech that we need? So there's a little bit of working through that. But I think no one wants to go through that experience, but you've got to, as Nick says, look at the positive side of things and what can we learn from it and take on. And actually, I think we're stronger for it all round, aren't we now?
Yeah, I definitely think that. And I think the team are stronger, like individually. Like I think, you know, when lockdown first happened, it was so intense. I know we would chat about, like the workload was just so intense because the need for the support was higher. I feel quite emotional talking about it because the need for the families was so intense that not one of the team turned around and said, are we furloughing? Like no one even questioned it. It was like, okay, we need to do even more now to make sure the children and young people don't feel isolated and they never feel alone. So the community within Scotty's was incredible. And I think that's something, you know, I'll always remember that and be really proud from that.
Determination, wasn't there? We were all like, we're going to make this work.
Yeah.
Like, there was no way we weren't because everyone was so determined.
And I think having that, where Scotty's has tried to be transparent with our supporters, you know, we try and look after our supporters and try and show them what we're doing. That also meant that our supporters were 100% behind us, and that without a doubt helped Scotty's to continue and grow, which is incredible. So
it's interesting, isn't it, how something so difficult and negative has had quite a positive impact in many ways.
Yeah.
And I've got a question here from Jay Worthy, and he's asked, what's the biggest lesson you have learned on your journey so far that other startup charities could benefit from now?
Wow.
What can we teach other
There you
charities?
go. It's
Quite a big question, that.
Massive
we've been doing this 11 years. We've made so many mistakes that we've learned from. We could do a whole episode on
what not to do.
Yeah, I mean that's what it, as long as you understand what you've done wrong and then you correct it and you move forward and you learn from it. I think that's good. But I like, so there's so many. If I had to pick one, I would say authenticity. You just got to being authentic about who you are, what you're trying to achieve. You mentioned earlier, I think, transparency.
Yeah.
It's just don't try and be something you aren't. Don't shape what you're doing to meet other people's expectations. It's the same with funding, and sometimes funding opportunities come along and we have to say no because it doesn't fit with what we're doing. We're not going to bend our family programs and alter them based on what funding is available. We're doing it based on the need of the families and just keeping it authentic. And most of that comes from Nikki because she's lived that experience. So when we say we've got a pretty good understanding of what families go through, it's because we do have a pretty good opportunity, experience of that, and listen to the families as well, and put them at the centre of everything, don't we?
The beneficiaries listen to what their needs are. But I think for me, probably I was sitting while Stuart was talking, trying to think, and actually I think on a personal level for me, it's been learning when you can say, I'm trying to think how to word it. I've had to learn that I can't do everything. And when I set up the charity, I had this idea, this vision, and the vision is still there today, which is something I love. We've never drifted. We've always kept straight to who we want to help and how we want to help. But I got to a point where I had to say, okay, I'm going to hold my hands up. I've got strengths and I've got weaknesses. And if I want the charity to develop and help these children and young people, I can't do certain areas. So for me, having to let go and bring Stuart on as CEO, bring all the team on. Every time the team do something, I'm like, oh, I would have been doing that. I would have had to do that. I would have had to do that. And I think it's not being afraid to bring people in.
Yeah.
And get, I think at Scotty's we've got such a good culture that we can help people to see the vision, be clear on the mission, and then, like Stuart said, we follow our values so that you can't go much wrong if you keep within the values of what we do.
Good advice. And I've got a couple of quicker ones here because we're getting towards the end of our list now. Dominic O'Sullivan has asked, how many Scotty graduates have you had?
Oh, cool. Okay. So we've got 54 we've had that have completed, graduated from Scotty's. Never sure what you call it really. So there's 90 springboarders at the moment. So that's 18 to 25-year-olds. And when they reach 25, they then become a graduate. Yeah, so 54. And it's really, what I love about Scotty's is they often come back, they stay in touch, they keep you updated, they come back and fundraise or volunteer. So they've never quite left, to be honest.
That must be nice for you because you feel a bit emotional when they kind of almost come to the end of their journey.
Especially if they've been with Scotty's for a long time and you've seen them grow and develop and as a person, and then they're off, in their career and starting a family and
Makes you feel old, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's very old.
And there's also a question here about the charity's reserves and how large are they? That's one for you, Stuart.
It's another classic one.
How much money have we got? People are asking.
People want to know about the money.
No, it's good. It's a good, it's a fair question, I think, for us. We've got around £500,000 in the bank to answer that question directly. If you go back to that conversation we had earlier about the financial statements, and if you look at the reserves in a financial report, that's going to include things like assets that we own. So that number will include the value of our holiday lodges and equipment, and the 2 vehicles that we own, things like that. So that isn't liquid cash. So when we talk about how many reserves, we're talking about the cash that we've got. So if we stopped fundraising today, how much cash have we got in the bank, and how long could we continue to operate for with that money that we have available to spend? So the 500,000 is roughly about 6 months worth. So we're at a point now where we need to be raising around £1 million a year to support approximately 500 young people, and there's different levels of support. Some of it is really quite intense one-to-one stuff, and some of it is a bit more light touch. So there's quite a high level of support that can be needed. So around about £1 million a year at the moment, 500 young children and young people going through that process. We've got about £500,000 in the bank, so that's approximately 6 months worth of cash.
That feels good.
I think. Well, I mean, and what should that level be? Is another question, and it's difficult. I mean, I've always been told 6 to 9 months is a good number to have, because if you do go through a dip, you've got a bit of a buffer there. You're not at risk of going out of business, if you like, in the short term. If you have more than that, sometimes funders will look at you and go, well, you've got quite a bit of money there. Maybe you don't need our money, So it's just, I mean, it's different for all charities. I'll be, and sometimes if you look at those financial statements and you look at a high number, you've got to understand what that number's made up of, because like I say, there will be a lot of assets in there that maybe can't be liquidized really easily. Maybe there's some investments that, there's a lot of different things in there that mean that money actually isn't usable in the short term. So yeah, we aim for 6 months. And that's where we are at the moment, and that works for us today.
Thank you. And we've got a question here about future jobs at the charity, and we've been asked if we're expecting to recruit any more team members soon.
Yeah. Well, I think, yes is the answer. Again, we are so focused on making sure that we do everything based on need. You'll know how much work we could be doing. We could recruit 10 people tomorrow and give them full-time jobs to do and worthwhile jobs to do. But obviously we can't do that. We've got to balance that against the need of the families and the funds that we have available. And again, making sure that we spend the right proportion on the kind of operational side of things, fundraising side. So the answer will be yes, because we need to grow. So that, if you've got 2 people working on your support program and you want to go from 500 young people to 1,000 young people, you're probably going to need more support people. So, that's going to happen. But then as you grow the organization, it's just one of those things, unfortunately, you need more operational support around that. You need people to help make sure that everything's working, so that when those guys come in to do their job, they're not having to worry about the tech or, the office lights being on and all that kind of stuff, the waste being, it's amazing, the insurance, the risk assessments, all the finances, all of those kind of things, they have to be done, and the bigger you get as an organization, the more of that stuff you need. So it's about kind of balancing that. So we're kind of, I guess, we've invested a lot in the families team over the last 12 months. We've got that into a really good place, I think. And I would imagine in the next sort of 6 months or so, we will need to look at how we raise funds and give those a little bit more investment in that area. And also operationally. So, things like management accounting, we're getting into heavier numbers here. So we need to make sure that we're using those funds efficiently and we're being responsible with them. So, so I think in the short term, a few operational and fundraising roles are probably on the cards, to be honest. And then we'll get back to the good stuff with the families team as they grow as well.
So if anyone wants to join the team, they should keep an eye out.
Yeah,
or let us know if they've got something they could add.
And we often, we often have on the website potential roles that we have coming up. So maybe, so that's a good way of getting in like ahead and having a look, see what might be on the cards. And subscribing to our monthly email newsletter. So if there is, if there are new jobs, then we're going to put it on there, so that will give you the heads up as well. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. And then my final question, but if anyone has got any other questions at any point, we will do more of these. So there's going to be opportunities for more questions. But my final question, which I think is really important, because at the heart of Scotty's is Corporal Lee Scott, Nikki's husband, and that's the reason Scotty's is here. So what do you think Lee would say if he could see the work the charity is doing in his name?
Keep it, it's a family show.
Oh, I think he'd be so proud. He's so energetic and passionate that he'd be jumping up and down. I can see him when I do when certain things happen here at Scotty's. I can see Lee being like, yes. But I definitely think that if he was alive and there was a charity like Scotty's, he would be 100% fundraising for it, making sure that his children would be looked after if something happened to him. So I know he'd be so proud and thanking everyone that supports Scotty's or works for Scotty's, or he would be loving it.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you both for answering our questions, and hopefully that's been insightful for our supporters.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks.